You don't wake up expecting to become a problem for HR. It happens slowly, the way a ceiling starts leaking. One quiet drop at a time until the floor is soaked and someone finally admits the pipe was broken all along. For me, it started with paperwork. I work in health insurance compliance. In my world, everything comes down to what's written, when it was written, and who touched the file last. Clients argue, managers negotiate, executives clarify, but the documentation never lies. I guess that's where my trouble began. I wrote too much, not essays, not complaints, just notes. Detailed, boring notes. The kind of notes people forget about until someone reads them. I was the guy who marked every call. Client informed of policy gap. Manager requested override against standard procedure. Audit risk flagged. Verbal approval given with no written follow-up. Nothing dramatic, just reality. My manager, Phil, hated it. He wasn't a bad manager in the screaming sense. He was worse. He was the kind who smiled while undoing things behind your back. The kind who called problems optics and solutions alignment. The kind who said things like, "Let's keep this clean, okay? No extra commentary." Translation: stop writing things that make us look bad. I didn't stop. Not because I was rebellious, but because the system itself required transparency. If something went wrong and the documentation wasn't there, the blame always rolled downhill. Straight to the person who last touched the file. Usually someone like me. So I documented everything, and that habit is what placed me directly in the crosshairs. One Tuesday afternoon, Phil called me into a small conference room. No windows, the kind of room where bad news is delivered in soft voices. He sat down, folded his hands, and said, "We need you to be a little less meticulous." I remember blinking, confused. Meticulous is literally my job. He laughed like I'd told a joke. Sure, but we also need to protect client relationships. Too much detail can be misinterpreted. Misinterpreted by who? Auditors, regulators, clients, the board? He didn't specify. He didn't have to. I walked out with a feeling I couldn't shake. The kind of feeling that sits under your ribs and quietly tells you you're stepping on something someone didn't want touched. That night, at home, I reread my notes from the last few months. Nothing unusual. Nothing malicious. Just timestamps, decisions, contradictions, corrections. The normal chaos of a company trying too hard to look clean on paper. But then I noticed something else. A pattern. Phil's edits. Little adjustments he'd make after my notes were submitted. They were small, easy to miss, changing the order of events, softening the language, removing indicators of risk. On 3 occasions, he outright deleted entire entries, replacing them with short summaries that shifted responsibility away from management. I stared at the screen for a long time. I wasn't angry. I wasn't scared. I was aware. And awareness changes everything. Still, nothing prepared me for the email that arrived the following Friday. A routine annual review of our largest client, a 1.2 authors insurance account, was being escalated for a deeper audit due to inconsistencies. Inconsistencies in documentation. Documentation I handled. My stomach dropped. Not because I'd done something wrong, but because I knew exactly who would try to make it look like I did. Phil. But here's the thing about detailed notes. They don't disappear just because someone wants them gone. Versions exist. Audit trails exist. And my name was attached to every single timestamp, every single entry, every single attempt at rewriting history. I sat back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and understood. This wasn't going to stay inside the office. This wasn't going to be a quiet review. Someone would be reading everything. Someone outside the company. But that was just the beginning. The moment that turned suspicion into certainty. The moment that made everything unravel. Happened 4 days later at 4:30 p.m. when HR sent me a calendar invite with a subject line I'd never seen before. Transition options discussion. I hadn't requested a transition, I hadn't been warned. And there's only one reason HR schedules a meeting at 4:30 p.m. They wanted silence. They wanted speed. They wanted me gone. And they had no idea what was already in that file. HR offices always smell the same. Carpet cleaner, stale coffee, and the faint trace of anxiety from everyone who ever walked in before you. When I stepped inside, two people were already seated. Marissa, our HR business partner, and a man I'd only seen in passing, someone from employee relations. They smiled the kind of smile that says everything is already decided. "Thanks for joining us," Marissa said, closing the door softly behind me. No windows. Same room Phil used. Same chairs. Same table. Different executioners. I sat. Employee relations started talking first, a sign they weren't wasting time. "We've been reviewing your recent performance trends." I raised an eyebrow. "What trends?" He glanced at a folder with my name tabbed on the side. "There have been concerns regarding your documentation style. It's created friction with management and caused instability." Instability. That was the word they chose. Marissa leaned forward, her voice rehearsed. "We'd like to offer you a mutual separation. 1 month's pay, continuation of benefits until the end of the month, and a neutral reference. In return, you'll agree not to contest the separation or raise concerns about internal processes." Translation: sign this paper. Leave quietly. Pretend nothing happened. I felt the irritation rise, slow, controlled, almost clinical. No performance warnings, no improvement plan, not even a conversation, just this? Marissa inhaled, preparing the HR-safe sympathy voice. "We understand this may feel sudden, but we believe this solution protects you as much as it protects the company." I didn't touch the papers. What exactly am I being protected from? Silence. Real silence. The kind where two people realize they've said too much by saying nothing. Phil's fingerprints were all over this. He'd panicked. Or maybe he thought weeks of edits and quiet deletions would be easier to bury if the person who wrote the original notes wasn't around when the audit landed on someone's desk. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But the irritation sharpened when Marissa pushed the folder toward me like she was sliding a menu across a restaurant table. "Take your time to review," she said, "but we do need a decision today." Of course they did. Friday, 4:30 p.m., maximum pressure, minimum witnesses. I opened the folder, more out of curiosity than compliance. Inside were the usual documents: separation agreement, general release, non-disparagement clause, and a line I'd never seen in any HR paperwork I'd handled before. Employee acknowledges that departing is in mutual interest and agrees that no internal or external review shall be contacted, triggered, or influenced by their departure. My fingers froze. They'd written review, not complaint, not investigation. Review. They knew. They knew a large file was being audited, one they hoped would die quietly or land on the desk of someone too overworked to care. But they didn't know the timing. They didn't know the reviewer had already asked for extended access logs. They didn't know I had received an automated notification 2 days earlier, confirming my original notes had been pulled, including versions Phil edited, and they definitely didn't know that removing an employee before an audit only draws more questions. I closed the folder. "No." Marissa blinked twice. "No to reviewing or no to signing?" "No to all of it. I'm not agreeing to a mutual separation, and I'm not leaving." The employee relations guy interlocked his fingers, leaning forward. "You understand that refusing this option may lead to termination for cause, right?" "For cause? Based on what?" I asked. "My documentation? That's the job. Or is the cause that my notes don't match what someone wanted them to say?" His jaw tightened. He wasn't supposed to react. HR trains you not to. Marissa stepped in, smoothing the conflict. "This doesn't have to be adversarial. We can revisit the language if needed, but the outcome remains the same. It's time for you to move on." There it was, the real message. Not performance, not behavior, not misconduct. Just, you documented things we hoped you wouldn't. You noticed things we hoped you'd ignore. You stayed in the room longer than convenient. I stood. I'm not signing. And if you plan to fire me, do it formally, with cause, on paper, and I want a copy. They looked at each other. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. They expected confusion. Maybe panic. Maybe bargaining. What they got was composure, because irritation had shifted into something colder. I walked out without another word. Halfway down the hallway, I saw Phil standing near the copy machine, pretending to talk to someone, pretending not to notice me. His eyes flicked sideways for half a second, enough to tell me everything I needed to know. He'd been waiting, counting on HR to finish what he started. He didn't expect me to walk out upright, and he definitely didn't expect what happened next. That night, at home, I logged into the system, carefully through my approved access. I didn't change anything. I didn't add anything. I simply checked the audit trail on the 1.2 MB client file. A new entry had been generated, time-stamped, locked, encrypted. External reviewer accessed full version history. Review ongoing. My irritation settled into something heavier, deeper, the understanding that this was no longer internal politics, no longer whispers, no longer HR scripts. This was evidence, and someone else, someone with authority, was reading it now. They thought the meeting would end me. They didn't realize it had begun something else. The following Monday felt off, not dramatic, not cinematic, just off. The way the air changes before a storm. People in the office avoided eye contact, not in a hostile way, more in the we heard something but we weren't supposed to way. Whispers ended when I walked by. Slack channels went quiet mid-sentence. Phil, who usually strutted through the hallway with performance report confidence, stayed glued to his office. His blinds were half closed, something he only did when he was either on a private call or afraid someone would see him panicking. But the strangest moment happened at 9:47 a.m. The external auditor, the one reviewing the 1.2 Mart account, logged into our system again. I saw the notification in real time. Not because I was snooping, but because compliance staff get automated alerts whenever external access touches high-value files. But this alert was different. The reviewer wasn't just checking entries. They were comparing versions, line by line, timestamp by timestamp. 2 years' worth of history. Cold crawled up my spine. Not fear. The recognition that my notes weren't just notes anymore. They were the backbone of a timeline someone was reconstructing. And there were gaps. Gaps where Phil had deleted or overwritten entries. Gaps that didn't match the versioning logs. Gaps that only appear when edits are made after the permissible window. That's when my understanding shifted. HR wasn't trying to protect the company. They were trying to protect a person, and it wasn't me. By lunch, I knew something was brewing. Marissa from HR walked by my desk twice, each time slowing down like she wanted to talk but couldn't in public. She never looked directly at me, just scanned the general area with a neutral smile. Phil stayed in his office, the door half open, tapping his leg under the desk so fast the movement shook his chair. If you've ever seen a manager realize they've lost control of the narrative, you know the posture, stiff shoulders, rapid texting, sudden phone calls with fake enthusiasm. Around 2:15 p.m., everything snapped into clarity. A meeting invite appeared on my screen. Urgent documentation clarification, 2:30 p.m., requested by Phil required attendees, Phil plus me, optional HR business partner, Marissa. I stared at the notification for a long moment. Clarification, not review, not correction. Clarification, meaning Phil had seen something in the audit, something he didn't like, something he hoped he could fix before anyone asked the wrong question. I went, not because I owed him anything, but because I wanted to see how desperate he'd become. Phil was already in the conference room, pacing. He stopped when I entered, plastering on his customer service smile. "Thanks for coming," he said quickly, shutting the door behind me. "No windows again. Always these windowless rooms. We just need to align on some notes you made in the Henderson file." "The Henderson file? The 1.2 member client?" I sat calmly. "What about them?" He cleared his throat, flipping through printed sheets. "Some of the language you used could be misinterpreted by the reviewer. Things that make it seem like there were irregularities." "I documented exactly what was said," I replied. "Nothing more." He winced at the word exactly. Phil liked things approximate. Approximate things can be bent. He took a breath. "Here's what we're thinking. Maybe you and I can walk through the entries together and adjust the phrasing where necessary. Clean up anything that could cause confusion." "By confusion," I said, "you mean accountability." His jaw twitched. I wasn't trying to be clever. It was just the truth. And Phil hated the truth unless it benefited him. He lowered his voice. "This isn't about fault. This is about avoiding unnecessary complications." "Complications for whom?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he slid one page toward me. A printout of my own note from 8 months ago. The original timestamp. My initials. And right below it, the modified version with his initials 3 days later. He was sweating. Not dripping, but the subtle sheen that appears when someone realizes they're losing a battle they pretended wasn't happening. "They might ask about this," he murmured. "We just need to make sure our story is consistent." Our story. That was the moment. The crack. The one where irritation turned into something heavier. Not anger at him, but anger at how casually he expected me to rewrite reality to match his version. I pushed the paper back across the table. "I'm not changing anything." His face stiffened. "You understand that refusing to collaborate on this can impact how HR processes your case, correct?" There it was. The threat. The quiet managerial kind that hides behind policies. "I'm not changing my documentation," I repeated. "If the reviewer has questions, they can ask me directly." Phil sat down slowly, folding his hands so tightly his knuckles whitened. "They already asked?" he said. My stomach dropped. "What?" "They asked," he repeated, "why certain entries appear to be overwritten, and why some events don't line up with the decision logs." For the first time, Phil wasn't performing. He wasn't managing. He wasn't in control. He was afraid. And then he said something I will never forget, because it revealed the entire truth in one sentence. "They think you wrote those after the fact," he said quietly. "They think you are the problem." That hit me harder than anything HR had done. Not the accusation, but the realization that Phil had spent weeks preparing to blame everything on me. Every overwritten entry, every softened phrase, every discrepancy. He'd built an entire escape hatch out of my work, and he expected me to walk into it willingly. I leaned back, feeling something shift inside me. Not defeat, but a cold clarity. "They won't think that for long," I said. Phil froze. For the first time, he heard something in my voice. Resolve. Not loud, not aggressive. Just final. "What do you mean?" he asked. I stood. "The reviewer has full version history, including edits made outside allowable windows, and they already accessed it." Phil's expression cracked. Real fear now. "You don't know that," he said too quickly. "I do," I answered, "because I got the access alert." He swallowed hard. "You got an alert?" he whispered. "Yes." He stared at me, realization settling in like a slow-moving disaster. "You're not going to help me fix this, are you?" I opened the door. "No," I said, stepping out. And for the first time, truly the first time, he didn't try to stop me. He knew something had changed. Not in the audit. Not in HR. In me. And that's when the breaking point came. Not with shouting. Not with some dramatic scene. But with one email that arrived at 5:12 p.m. "Please prepare for compliance interviews. Reviewer will be on site Thursday." Not virtual. Not remote. On site. Phil wouldn't be able to control the room. HR wouldn't be able to script it. I wouldn't be cornered in a windowless office again. This time, Everything would be on record, and they had no idea what was waiting for them in the Henderson file, because the cracks in their plan had already started spreading, and now someone with authority was following them. The office changed the moment the reviewer arrived. Not in a dramatic, movie-like way, no shouting, no badges flashing, just a man in a charcoal suit walking through the lobby with a badge that wasn't ours, a contractor ID. He carried a tablet, not a laptop, no small talk, no smile. The kind of person whose presence makes managers sit up straighter. He signed in at 8:03 a.m. By 8:15, he'd already requested a dedicated room, system access logs, and a stack of printed internal procedures. By 8:30, the building understood something was wrong. I wasn't in the room with him yet. That would come later. But the ripple effect was immediate. Phil closed his office door fully for the first time in months. HR stopped walking around with calm confidence and started whispering in corners. Directors who normally ignored our floor suddenly appeared, pretending to check printers. Something was unraveling, and they knew it. At 10:06 a.m., my compliance lead pinged me privately. Heads up. Reviewer asked specifically for you. Going to need you in room 4B around noon. I stared at the message for a moment. Not fear. Anticipation. Not adrenaline. Clarity. Room 4B was one of the bigger conference rooms, the kind used for board subcommittee meetings. Glass walls. Recording allowed if both parties consented. Corporate neutral territory. I arrived 10 minutes early. The reviewer was already there, mid-40s, serious, professional but not unfriendly. The kind of person who had seen every trick, every excuse, every attempt to rewrite the past. He gestured for me to sit. "Thanks for making time," he said. "You handled most of the Henderson documentation, correct?" I nodded. "Yes, for the last year and a half." He tapped his tablet. "Your notes are detailed, consistent, structured. That's helpful." I exhaled slowly. That small recognition alone told me the next hour might actually be fair. Then he turned the tablet toward me. A time-stamped version history entry from 8 months ago. My note. Phil's later edit. "I want to ask you about this," he said. "Why were there 2 versions?" "I wrote the first one," I said simply. "The second was edited after submission." "By your manager," he added. "Yes." He didn't react, didn't nod, didn't frown. He just scrolled to the next entry. Another overwritten note. And another. And another. 7 total. 7 entries altered. Outside permitted windows. 7 fingerprints pointing in one direction. He finally asked the question that everyone else had danced around. "Did you authorize these edits?" "No?" "Did you know they were being made?" "I discovered some of them later. Others I didn't know about until recently." He tapped the screen again. New page. "Why didn't you report it at the time?" A fair question. One a real reviewer would absolutely ask. "Because nothing technically broke yet," I said. "Edits happen. Sometimes after calls. Sometimes for clarity. I documented what was necessary. If I'd raised a complaint without evidence, it would have been dismissed as misunderstanding or internal misalignment." He nodded once. "That's reasonable." He wasn't looking for drama. He was looking for patterns, and he'd already found them. Then he leaned forward. "I'm going to show you something," he said. He pulled up the change logs, not just version history, but access metadata. Every time Phil touched a file, every time he modified something, every time he attempted to mask it. "Your manager," the reviewer said carefully, "made edits hours, sometimes days, after the documented events." That's what it looked like to me. And some of those edits shifted accountability from management to frontline staff. That's what it looked like to me, too. He locked the tablet. "I appreciate your clarity." There was no theatrics, no gasps, just a professional acknowledgement, the kind that carries more weight than shouting. The interview lasted another hour, straightforward, clinical, fair. When I left room 4B, I expected the air in the office to feel lighter. Instead, it felt heavier. At 1:22 p.m., Phil's door slammed. Not loudly, but loudly for him. He wasn't a door slammer, he was a door closer, A door easer, a door whisper. Hearing a physical thud from his office felt like a tectonic shift. HR went into that room within minutes. Marissa walked fast, holding a folder. The employee relations guy followed 5 minutes later. Their faces were tight. Not angry, but bracing. By 2:03 p.m., word spread that the reviewer had escalated concerns. Not confirmed, not proven, just concerns. But that alone was enough to ignite silent panic. Managers stopped talking in hallways. Team leads canceled meetings. Directors huddled. People who had avoided me for days suddenly avoided Phil instead. I was at my desk, responding to emails, when Phil appeared behind me. He didn't look like a manager anymore. He looked like someone who'd been told a truth he didn't think anyone outside his circle would ever see. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I stood. "About what?" He swallowed. "Look, whatever you said in that room—" "I told the truth," he winced. That word again. "I'm not your enemy," he said, softer now. "This whole thing, it got out of hand. It got out of hand when my notes were altered." He shut his eyes for a moment. "Just don't make this worse than it has to be, for either of us." I stared at him. This wasn't confidence. This wasn't manipulation. This wasn't control. This was fear. Because for the first time, Phil understood something he'd never considered. I didn't need to destroy him. He'd already done that part himself. All I had done was write things down. Before I could reply, someone called his name. The reviewer, standing 10 feet away. "Phil, I need you in room 4B. Phil looked like his soul slid halfway out of his body. He nodded numbly and followed him. The hallway went dead quiet. I didn't hear what happened in that room. I don't know if voices were raised or if everything stayed calm and procedural. But I do know this. At 4:11 p.m., Phil walked out of room 4B with his face drained of color. HR walked behind him. Employee relations followed. They weren't escorting him out, not yet. But they were walking in formation, the unmistakable pattern of an internal crisis. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He just went into his office, closed the door, and stayed there. No pacing this time, no phone calls, no movement, like someone waiting for gravity to finish what it had already started. I stood there for a moment, feeling the shift settle through the building like an aftershock. This wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time the damage wasn't mine to carry, not anymore. There's a particular kind of quiet that only exists in offices during an internal crisis. Not silence, more like a collective holding of breath. No jokes, no casual Slack messages, no footsteps that aren't necessary. That's what Thursday felt like. Friday was worse. People arrived early without speaking. The directors were already in the building before 8 a.m. They never came in that early unless something was burning. The reviewer was back too. Same charcoal suit, same expression, same tablet tucked under his arm. But the real shift came at 10:42 a.m. The CFO was here. She never came to our floor. Not once in the 10 years I'd been with the company. CFOs operate in glass offices, not cubicle aisles. They don't mingle. They don't wander. But she arrived with intention, and with her came someone from legal. Not HR's legal, not a company attorney. Corporate legal. When those two show up together, the question is no longer, is something wrong? It's, who is responsible and how soon can we isolate the damage? By 11:10 a.m., Phil was called into a meeting with them and the reviewer. Not room 4B this time. A real conference room. The kind with dual monitors, microphones, and a sign-in sheet. The door closed. No one came out for an hour. I didn't listen in, didn't hover, didn't pace. I went back to my desk, opened my laptop, and did my actual job. Compliance work doesn't stop just because the building is shaking. At 12:22 p.m., the meeting finally ended. Phil walked out first. He wasn't angry. He wasn't frantic. He looked hollow. The kind of expression people get when they've run out of ways to spin, argue, charm, or dodge. Behind him came HR, then legal, then the reviewer, and finally the CFO holding a thin stack of papers. She didn't look at me, not out of avoidance, out of professionalism, but she stopped by my manager's office long enough to drop the folder on his desk. Phil picked it up with shaking hands. He didn't open it. He already knew. He closed his office door, and this time it stayed closed for good. At 1:07 p.m., the official announcement went out. Effective immediately, Phil Anderson is no longer with the company. His responsibilities will be transitioned to interim leadership. Further details will be communicated as needed. No thank you message. No farewell. No, we wish him the best. Just an immediate termination, for cause. Later, I found out how the meeting had gone. Not from gossip, but from compliance briefings. The reviewer confirmed multiple altered entries. Edits were made outside allowable time frames. Version history proved the changes came from Phil's account. Access logs showed attempted concealment. My documentation aligned with call recordings and decision logs. His adjustments did not. He had exposed the company to regulatory risk. He had misrepresented decision paths. He had compromised audit integrity. That's not a slap on the wrist. That's a career-ending event. HR never apologized for the silent exit attempt. They don't do that. HR avoids admitting fault. But they did something far more telling. At 2:14 p.m., Marissa came to my desk with a neutral expression but a different tone, one I had never heard from her before. "Can we talk privately?" We went into a small meeting room, this time with windows. She sat, exhaled slowly, and folded her hands. "I want to acknowledge," she said carefully, "that the situation you were placed in was not handled correctly." It wasn't an apology, but in HR language, it was the closest possible equivalent. "We will be removing your previous file notations related to the separation discussion," she continued. "Going forward, you're not under review, and there will be no further conversations of that nature." I nodded, but didn't say anything. HR people are trained to watch reactions. I wasn't giving them any. "There's one more thing," she added, sliding a document toward me. A formal letter. "We would like to offer you a position within the audit liaison team. A title increase, a compensation adjustment, effective immediately." I read it twice. It wasn't a promotion out of generosity. It was a recognition of value and a shield. People who help auditors uncover internal risk don't get pushed out. They get moved where their clarity helps protect the company. And for once, the company was acting logically. I accepted the role, not because I needed a title, not because I wanted to spite Phil, but because it solved the one lingering fear I still had, being placed back under someone who could weaponize my work. When I left the meeting room, the office felt different, lighter, realigned, quiet, but not in a fearful way, in a way that said people understood exactly what had happened. That afternoon, on my way out, I passed the desk where Phil used to sit. Empty now, his nameplate removed, his monitors wiped. There was no satisfaction in seeing an empty space, no thrill, no victory lap, just closure. Because here's the thing, I didn't destroy him. I didn't fight him. I didn't sabotage him. I didn't leak anything. I didn't hack anything. I didn't manipulate anyone. I documented reality. And reality did the rest. As I walked through the lobby, badge in hand, security nodded at me like they knew, not the details, but the shape of what had happened. On my way out, my phone buzzed. An email from the reviewer. Short, professional, firm. "Thank you for your accuracy. Your notes prevented a far larger issue." I stood outside the building for a moment, letting the cold evening air settle. For the first time in weeks, there was no weight on my chest, no fear, no doubt, no second-guessing, just certainty. What HR tried to silence ended up saving the company. What Phil tried to bury ended up burying him. And what I wrote, quietly, routinely, carefully, is what stood when everything else collapsed. Because sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's a timestamp. It's a truth that doesn't bend. It's a version history that can't be rewritten. And everything that happened after that was no longer a fight. It was payback.